We have with us.
I'm going to ask you to raise your right hand and repeat after me.
What happens when America's toughest TV judge loses control, live against a congresswoman who refuses to flinch? The cameras catch it in brutal clarity. Judge Judy, the embodiment of sharp authority, leans forward, her voice slicing through the studio air. It isn't the clipped, witty reprimand that made her famous. It's raw, unrestrained, a scream that ricochets off the walls and rattles the audience into stunned silence. For decades, she has thrived on control of the room, control of the case, control of the people trembling beneath her glare. But tonight that control evaporates in real time. Her fury bursts like a dam too long under pressure. Every syllable is fire, every breath drawn like gasoline poured onto an open flame. And yet, opposite her, Jasmine Crockett does not move. Not a flicker, not a twitch. She sits in the heat of that rage like marble carved from ice, her gaze level, unblinking. Where most would shrink, apologize, or collapse into stammers, she offers nothing. The silence is louder than the scream itself, ringing in the ears of everyone watching, inside the studio and across millions of screens worldwide. That stare, cold and unyielding, is its own verdict. Crockett doesn't need to speak. The scream judges itself. The moment stretches. Judy, red-faced and trembling, throws her fury harder, trying to break the stillness. But still, Crockett doesn't budge. It is the composure of someone who has weathered storms far greater than televised scorn. In that silence lives every courtroom battle she fought before entering politics, every voice that tried to silence her and failed. The audience feels the power shift. The gavel slips. For the first time, the judge looks less like the authority and more like the spectacle. Crockett, without a word, becomes the axis of the room. And so the viral seed is planted, a scream versus a stare, fire against ice. It will not remain confined to this studio. Before the night ends, the clip will flash across timelines, stitched into memes, dissected on talk shows, replayed until its symbolism is undeniable. This is not just TV drama, it is a generational clash. And the question lingers when rage collides with composure, who truly holds the power? For 30 years, Judge Judy has reigned as a cultural force. She is the face of televised justice, the no-nonsense arbiter whose voice has cracked across living rooms like a whip. Entire generations grew up on the ritual someone lies, Judy sees through it, and with a single phrase, she strips their pride bare. Nobody talks back. Nobody wins against her. That was the unspoken law. Her courtroom was not a stage, it was a throne room. And in that throne room, Judy was untouchable. Her empire was built on fear disguised as respect. She cultivated an image so sharp it cut through the clutter of daytime television. People tuned in not to learn the law, but to witness power. They came for the thrill of watching ordinary citizens tremble under her glare, for the satisfaction of seeing arrogance reduced to dust. She was the judge, the jury, and the performance all in one. But while Judy built her legacy inside a studio, Jasmine Crockett was shaping hers in the storm of real-world politics. A civil rights lawyer turned congresswoman, Crockett carried her battles on her skin and in her voice. She was not known for bowing her head or softening her words. She was known for her fearless cross-examinations, her viral moments on the House floor, her refusal to back down even when the weight of institutions pressed against her. She belonged to a generation that refused silence, one that wielded composure like a blade sharper than any insult. Crockett did not rise on spectacle. She rose on scars. Every fight in courtrooms where voices were ignored, every speech where she stood against ridicule, forged an unshakable calm. Her weapon was not rage. It was the absence of it. And in the political theater, that absence carried more weight than shouting ever could. Now, destiny, or perhaps irony, placed them opposite each other. Two women cut from different eras, both wielding authority but in radically different ways. Judy, the embodiment of old-school discipline, order imposed by dominance, a hierarchy reinforced by fear. Crockett, the new wave counterforce discipline as stillness, order through resilience, power drawn from the refusal to be rattled. It was never just a clash of personalities. It was a clash of values. One represented a generation that believed shouting equaled strength, that authority must be enforced with volume. The other represented a future where silence and composure humiliate rage, where power is measured not by who yells loudest, but by who refuses to be moved. And the stage for this clash was not a courtroom or a chamber. It was live television, an arena where reputations can be immortalized or dismantled in seconds. The audience didn't know it yet, but they were about to witness more than entertainment. They were about to see a symbol unfold, the fall of untouchable authority, and the rise of a challenger who needed no theatrics to win. Judy leaned on her decades of dominance. Crockett leaned on the discipline of survival. Both were undefeated in their own arenas. Both had never truly faced the other's style of power. The tension was inevitable, and the stakes were larger than a single scream. But what happens when the gavel meets the Ice Queen? Judge Judy's empire was forged not in marble halls, but on the glow of daytime television. Her courtroom was unlike any other, a stage where justice was served with sarcasm and authority was defined by volume. She perfected the rhythm of tough love, though many wondered if it was love at all. A defendant's hesitation became a punchline. A poorly constructed excuse became an opening for humiliation. And the audience laughed because humiliation had become entertainment. Her brand was certainty. She was the human lie detector, the judge who never flinched, who never second-guessed her instincts. To millions, she wasn't simply a judge, she was a force of nature. People tuned in because they knew what to expect. Judy would cut through nonsense, rip apart arrogance, and reduce any challenger to rubble. The myth was simple and enduring: Judy can break anyone. But myths are fragile things, and they are most fragile when they believe themselves to be immortal. Judy's dominance thrived in an arena she controlled: her courtroom, her cameras, her rules. She was untouchable there because no one dared resist the script. People came in already trembling, already half broken, and Judy did the rest. Irony waits patiently, and in Judy's case, it waited for Jasmine Crockett. Crockett was not a trembling defendant, not a guest desperate for favor, not an ordinary citizen caught in the web of performance. She was a woman carved by battles of her own, unafraid of spectacle, unafraid of silence. She would not play Judy's game because she had built her own. And in that refusal, Judy's legacy began to wobble. For the first time in decades, the performance cracked. The question wasn't whether Judy could break Crockett, but whether Judy could survive not breaking her. Before she ever sat across from Judge Judy, Jasmine Crockett had already weathered storms that most would not survive. She began in the trenches of civil rights law, standing shoulder to shoulder with communities who had long been silenced. Courtrooms were not entertainment for her. They were battlegrounds where lives, freedoms, and futures were at stake. Every case sharpened her voice, every ruling hardened her resolve. Her weapon was never intimidation. It was words, honed to precision, delivered with wit and timing that could turn a hostile room into her arena. She mastered the art of holding still when others expected collapse. Her body language, chin raised, eyes fixed, shoulders squared, spoke before her voice ever did. In politics, that language became as potent as legislation itself. When Crockett rose to Congress, she carried those battles with her. On the House floor, her speeches cut through the haze of noise, leaving her opponents scrambling for footing. Viral moments of her dismantling condescension became her signature. But those clips were not mere sound bites. They were fragments of a larger truth. She did not yield, and she did not forget who she fought for. That was the difference between her and Judy. Judy's authority thrived in a studio, framed by cameras and controlled by production. Crockett's authority was born in chaos, built in real-world struggle, where no producer could step in to tame the fire. So when she walked onto that set, she wasn't just another guest lining up for the Judge Judy show. She carried with her every community silenced, every client overlooked, every voter who placed their fragile hope in her composure. The stakes were heavier than television ratings. Crockett wasn't there to entertain. She was there to endure and to win. The stage was dressed not as a courtroom, but as a debate set, polished wood gleaming beneath the hot lights, cameras circling like hawks. The audience buzzed with the anticipation that comes before a storm. Two women sat across from one another, generations apart yet bound by the inevitability of collision. Judy leaned forward first, the practiced authority of decades etched into her posture. She wasted no time in establishing the rules, not of the debate, but of her dominance. She interrupted mid-sentence, slicing through Crockett's introductions with the sharpness of a gavel-hitting oak. "Don't waste my time," she snapped, voice crackling across the microphones. The audience chuckled nervously, the familiar cadence of Judy's scorn awakening a reflexive response. But Crockett didn't flinch. She simply adjusted her shoulders, let the silence expand, and waited. Her refusal to chase Judy's tempo unsettled the rhythm. Where others rushed to fill the void, Crockett held it, turning Judy's interruption into a hollow echo. The debate pressed on. Each time Crockett began to explain, Judy lunged in, cutting her short, amplifying her volume. The veins at her temples pulsed, her tone shifting from sharp to shrill. It was the same script Judy had performed for years: overwhelm, dominate, reduce. Yet this time, it wasn't working. The more she pressed, the more Crockett seemed to withdraw into a composure so cold it was almost unnerving. The audience began to notice. Their laughter at Judy's quips faltered, replaced by a hush that carried its own weight. Their eyes moved from the judge to the Congresswoman, to the unblinking calm that refused to yield. Something about Crockett's stillness reframed the entire scene. Judy's aggression looked less like control and more like desperation. Judy sensed it too. Her words quickened, her hands gestured wildly, and her chair creaked beneath the force of her body leaning forward. Her face reddened, her voice raised until it nearly cracked. The harder she fought to control the narrative, the further it slipped from her grip. And Crockett remained, perfectly still. Every pause she allowed to hang after Judy's eruptions felt like a verdict. Her silence was not absence but presence, an invisible wall that Judy's fury slammed against, over and over, until it seemed to rebound on itself. Crockett's eyes never left Judy's face, and in that gaze, the entire audience saw something startling. The unshaken confidence of a woman who had been here before, who had faced worse storms and walked away untouched. The energy in the room shifted. Viewers leaned forward, not to watch Judy's rage but to witness Crockett's refusal. Phones were already out, screens glowing as people began recording, sensing that history was being made in real time. The tension was no longer in Judy's words but in the silence that followed them. Judy's dominance, so familiar, so rehearsed, was unraveling before their eyes. The mechanics of her authority were exposed. It only worked when others played along. Crockett was not playing. Her calm dismantled the entire performance, piece by piece. The pressure mounted with every exchange. Judy grew louder, redder, her fury threatening to boil over. Crockett's restraint, by contrast, only deepened, and as the cameras captured the contrast, rage against composure, fire against ice, the audience felt the inevitability of collapse. The lights seemed hotter. The air felt thick. A murmur rippled through the crowd as Judy's words collided with Crockett's silence one final time. And then, it snapped. The snap was not a sound but a shift, an invisible fracture that everyone in the studio felt at once. Judge Judy, who had spent her career commanding obedience with a glance, abandoned the careful rhythm of her authority. What came next was not control. It was an eruption. Her voice sharpened, rising higher than the microphones could comfortably carry. "Don't you dare sit there and pretend you know better than me!" The words landed like blows, heavy with the weight of a woman unaccustomed to challenge. Her tone carried not only rage but something dangerously close to panic. Crockett did not answer. Her stillness only widened the space for Judy's fury to echo. That silence, strategic, unyielding, was more cutting than any rebuttal. The audience leaned forward, hearts pounding, as the air between them grew charged enough to feel like static. Judy pressed harder, abandoning all semblance of judicial decorum. "You think, because you've got a title in Washington, that makes you untouchable. Let me tell you something. Respect isn't earned by hiding behind silence. Respect is earned by knowing your place." The words were personal now, no longer part of the spectacle her fans had come to adore. This was not the Judge Judy of syndicated reruns. This was a woman grasping to reassert dominance, flinging insults that cut against her carefully curated image of fairness. Crockett's eyes narrowed only slightly, a fraction of an inch, and then she straightened her posture. The move was subtle, but to the audience it read like defiance written in bold ink. Still, she remained silent. The longer she refused to respond, the louder Judy became. "Answer me!" Judy shouted, slamming her hand on the desk. The sound cracked through the set like a thunderclap. "Do you hear me? Speak! Don't just sit there staring at me like some kind of statue!" And finally, Crockett moved, not with fluster, not with anger, but with a calm so deliberate it felt almost supernatural. She leaned forward just enough to meet Judy's glare head-on. Her voice, when it came, was low, measured, and lethal in its simplicity. "I don't need to raise my voice to be heard." The room froze. The sentence was short, but it carried the force of a gavel dropping on a case long decided. It wasn't just what she said, it was what it revealed. Judy's scream had been stripped of its power. Her fury had been redefined as weakness. In contrast, Crockett's composure became the spectacle. For a moment, the cameras captured something extraordinary, Judy's mouth opening as if to fire back, then closing without a word. The silence that followed was deafening, the kind of silence that makes the human body tense with expectation. The audience gasped in unison, the sound rushing like wind through the studio. Some clapped their hands over their mouths, others whispered to their neighbors, not daring to speak above a hush. The balance of power had flipped. Judy's anger was no longer dominant, it was desperation. Crockett's calm was no longer passivity, it was triumph. The irony was cruel. Judy had built a career breaking others down with words. Yet here she was undone by someone who barely spoke at all. Her trademark sharpness, her weaponized scorn, suddenly looked like flailing. Crockett, meanwhile, appeared untouchable, cloaked in an aura of ice that Judy's fire could not melt. The clip was destined for virality, and the internet did not disappoint. Within minutes, social media lit up. On Twitter, captions flooded timelines. Did she just humble Judge Judy on her own turf? Crockett didn't even raise her voice and still won. Power isn't screaming. Power is silence. Memes multiplied. Crockett's still face juxtaposed against Judy's crimson fury. Reaction videos appeared before the debate even ended. TikToks replaying the single line on loop, each captioned with the same verdict iconic. Inside the studio, the tension remained unbearable. Judy tried to rally, her voice faltering as she attempted one last barb. You think that makes you strong, sitting there like you're above it all? But the words rang hollow, bouncing off Crockett's silence like pebbles against steel. The audience wasn't with her anymore. The tide had turned. They had seen something they would never forget, the queen of televised authority crumbling before a congresswoman who barely had to lift a finger. Repetition is a cruel mirror, and in the endless replays that followed, Judy's downfall grew clearer. Every frame showed the same contrast: rage against calm, fury against silence, spectacle against composure. And every time, the verdict was the same: silence wins. The irony deepened. Judy's brand, built on the humiliation of others, had been dismantled by her own humiliation, televised and immortalized. She had always believed she could break anyone. But Crockett revealed the flaw in that myth: Judy's power only worked when people played the game. Crockett refused to play. And in that refusal, she turned Judy's greatest weapon into her greatest weakness. The emotional punch lingered. The audience didn't just see a clash of personalities. They saw a parable about power itself, that rage without control is self-destruction, that composure under fire can rewrite the rules of battle. As the debate wound down, Judy sat rigid, her breathing heavy, her voice hoarse. Crockett remained collected, her expression unchanged, her lines still hanging in the air like smoke that refused to dissipate. I don't need to raise my voice to be heard. The echo of those words would outlive the broadcast. It would travel across screens, across conversations, across the very idea of what it meant to hold power in public. And for Judge Judy, it marked the beginning of an ending. For Jasmine Crockett, it was the moment she transcended from congresswoman to cultural symbol. The breaking point had been reached. And the world was watching. The moment Judy's voice cracked and Crockett delivered her line, the ripple effect was instant. Clips spread like wildfire, bouncing from phone to phone before the cameras even cooled. Within hours, the confrontation was everywhere. Headlines screaming, thumbnails flashing, reaction channels dissecting every pause and every breath. It was no longer just an exchange, it was a cultural flashpoint. Late-night comedians seized it with delight. Monologues replayed the clip, exaggerating Judy's red face and Crockett's stone stare. The punchlines wrote themselves: Judge Judy just got judged, one joke to roaring laughter. Another quipped, turns out the quiet ones don't just survive, they win. The audience howled, but beneath the comedy was recognition. Everyone knew they had witnessed something seismic. Online, the memes multiplied. Screenshots of Crockett's calm expression became reaction templates. Captions like, "Me ignoring drama at work," and "Silence louder than your whole argument," stacked up across platforms. Edits juxtaposed Crockett's stillness with explosions, storms, and roaring lions silenced in her gaze. The internet crowned her without hesitation. But the split was real. Older audiences, long loyal to Judy, rallied in her defense. She's earned the right to lose her temper. Some insisted. They framed Crockett's composure as disrespect, as arrogance masquerading as discipline. To them, Judy represented a hierarchy that had once kept the world in order. Younger viewers, however, saw the opposite. They hailed Crockett's restraint as revolutionary, an antidote to decades of authority equating volume with truth. In their eyes, Judy's scream was the sound of an era collapsing, while Crockett's quiet was the whisper of the future. The ideological clash sharpened into something more profound. This wasn't simply about two women on a stage. It was about two definitions of respect. Was respect earned by domination, by the ability to shout someone into silence? Or was it earned by composure, by proving unshakable when the storm rages? The hypocrisy could not be ignored. Judy had built her fame on control, control of the room, control of the spectacle, control of every trembling defendant who walked through her doors. Yet at the most public moment of her career, she lost control spectacularly. The irony was brutal. The judge who mocked weakness revealed her own. Audiences felt emotional whiplash. At first, laughter filled the room. Laughter at Judy's familiar barbs, at the old rhythm of her authority. But that laughter curdled into something else as Crockett's silence held. Awe replaced amusement. Then respect settled in, heavy and undeniable. Crockett hadn't shouted, hadn't performed, hadn't catered to spectacle. She had simply endured, and in doing so, she commanded more power than Judy's fury could ever muster. The fallout was more than viral. It was symbolic. Judy's scream was reduced to a meme, a relic of how power used to look. Crockett's stare became the emblem of how power was beginning to be redefined. And for millions watching, that shift carried an almost spiritual weight. One generation laughed nervously, clinging to the authority they'd always trusted. Another generation nodded, certain they were witnessing the birth of a new order. And in the tension between those reactions, the story of the night crystallized laughter to awe, awe to respect. Judge Judy had screamed, but Jasmine Crockett had redefined silence. When the dust settled, it was not Judy's roar that lingered in memory, but Crockett's stillness. That image, unmoving, unflinching, unshaken, became the closing note of the entire spectacle. In the storm of raised voices and sharp words, Crockett did not fight for dominance. She simply stood in her own center, and in that choice, she revealed something larger than the clash itself. The symbolism was undeniable. Chaos had unleashed itself in front of millions, but calm had proven the stronger force. Judy's fury burned hot, a flame meant to consume. Yet Crockett met that fire with ice, and the fire sputtered against it. The contrast crystallized into a metaphor. Authority built on intimidation may flare brilliantly, but authority built on composure endures. For viewers, the lesson struck deeper than entertainment. It wasn't just a viral clip, not just another meme or trending topic. It was a mirror held up to every workplace argument, every family dispute, every clash where shouting seemed inevitable. Crockett's composure whispered a truth many had forgotten: sometimes the most powerful weapon isn't raising your voice. It's refusing to be shaken. That truth carried catharsis. For years, Judy's image had thrived on the spectacle of control, the drama of dominance. People laughed, cringed, and cheered at the way she reduced guests to fragments. But in a single exchange, the curtain slipped. The judge who had made a career out of exposing weakness was herself exposed. The irony was complete. Crockett, on the other hand, emerged elevated. She had not planned to create a viral storm, yet her restraint resonated in a way no strategy could. By doing less, she became more. By answering fury with quiet, she commanded the narrative. The moment confirmed what her supporters already believed: she wasn't just a fighter in Congress, she was a symbol of a new kind of power. And so the story resolved itself in the minds of millions. Judy had screamed, but her scream became noise. Crockett had stared, and her silence became history. As the weeks passed, the clip still circled, still replayed, still dissected. But its meaning hardened into something undeniable. Fire may flare, but ice does not melt under pressure. It hardens, it sharpens, it lasts. In the end, Crockett did not need to win the argument. She won the moment. And sometimes, that is the greater victory. Judge Judy screamed, but Jasmine's cold response is what the world remembers. In that single exchange, a career built on dominance met the one force it could not bend: composure. The arrogance that once silenced countless voices was undone by a woman who refused to blink. It's more than television drama. It's a reminder that strength isn't measured in volume, but in control. That ice, steady and unshaken, can outlast the loudest firestorm. And in that room, under those blinding studio lights, Crockett proved the point for everyone watching. Now the question turns to you. If you were sitting there, watching that moment unfold live, whose side would you have taken? Would you stand with the judge who lost her grip, or with the Congresswoman who never lost her ground? Drop your reaction in the comments below, because this debate is bigger than one clip. And if you believe calm will always crush chaos, hit subscribe and stay with us as we follow the moments that shake power to its core. Because if Judy can lose her crown in one viral instant, then we have to ask who's next.